Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nega from Unisa Ethiopia Regional Learning Center. I am here only to say welcome to the session. We are very happy to have all of you. We are very happy to have each one of you in your respective dignitaries to have respected our invitation and to be here. Thank you very much for coming. And myself and Dr. Tong here will be the program directors of this evening. And I'll just give the floor over to Dr. Tong. Thank you.
Let's give her an applause. And Daminachu. And Daminachu. And Daminachu. Salam. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sani Bonani, Jumelang, Reteng. It is a great pleasure tonight to be here celebrating Unisa's 150th anniversary in Addis Ababa. We are here because our governments, the government of Ethiopia and the government of South Africa, saw it fit to enter into an agreement, a bilateral agreement with the two countries in the area of education. I would love to acknowledge our minister, South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, because indeed it is her ministry that facilitated that agreement that made it possible for Unisa to have a campus in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. The University of South Africa is celebrating a huge milestone today. However, this milestone does not only belong to South Africa or the university. It is a celebration of the history of higher education, not just in South Africa. We would love to believe in the continent of Africa as well and globally. The reason we say this is because the University of South Africa was the very first university to be established in our country. Globally, it was the first university to pioneer long-distance education. This is the reason when we celebrate Unisa, we say it's not just a South African celebration, it is an African celebration as well, because as you can see, we are here in Addis Ababa, the headquarters of the African Union, the city in which on 25 May 1963, a number of governments, heads of state, met in this city to establish the Organization of African Unity. So it is a great honor indeed for Unisa to be having a campus in this very important city in as far as Africa is concerned. We are very pleased that our Vice Chancellor, Prof. Kabula, is here, will be speaking. We're looking forward to hear from Minister Dr. Naledi Pando to give us a talk. We shall hear as well from the Minister of Education, Dr. Nega, in Ethiopia. And for us, that just shows the level of cooperation that exists between the two countries, not only because of Unisa, but because we also have the bilateral relations, and this event and Unisa campus here is a manifestation of that relationship. I will not take too much time. I would love to call my boss, Prof. Kabula, to come and properly welcome you and acknowledge all the participants. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. Salam. Salam walachu. Colleagues, salam. Are you not happy? Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to thanking Dr. Maureen Tong, the Director of Special Projects in the Office of Vice Chancellor, Dr. Tseche Abera, Regional Director, Unisa Ethiopia Regional Learning Center, who are going to be directing our program this evening. Let me first also acknowledge Her Excellency Dr. Naledi Pando, the Minister of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, His Excellency Professor Benau Nega, Minister of Education in Ethiopia, His Excellency Dr. Samuel Kifle, State Minister, Ministry of Education in Ethiopia, His Excellency Ambassador Kolisa Makaya, Head of South African Embassy in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, representing various countries in South Africa and in Ethiopia, we also welcome you. Professor Tenjiwe Meiwa, Vice Principal Research, Postgraduate Studies, Innovation and Commercialization at Unisa, Mr. Matiababa Mutebele, the Vice Principal, Operations and Facilities, and other members of senior and extended leadership of the University of South Africa, members and leadership of universities in Ethiopia that are partners with the University of South Africa, Professor Afeke Kasu Gizo, Director General, Amir Hansa Research Institute, Mrs. Haimanot Tesaya, Admin Finance FAO and Ethiopian Alumni Chapter, members of the National Representative Council, members of South African and Ethiopian governments, alumni conveners in different countries present here in the venue and virtually, members from the media fraternal present and virtually, members of Unisa community and other university stakeholders present and connected virtually, distinguished members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm truly elated and it is my singular privilege and honor to welcome you to this important occasion marking the celebration of a milestone of this august institution, the University of South Africa. Unisa was established in 1873, and by any stretch of imagination, this sesquicentenary is a significant milestone, meaning the 150 years. It represents longevity, resilience, creativity, innovation, and my own colleague, Professor Tong, has already stated that when it was founded, it was the Cape of Good Hope, and it was first established in South Africa as the first distance education in the world. This is quite important because it means Africa, 100 years and 50 years before the COVID-19, had also already seen the imperative of allowing people to studying as they were working and to working as they were studying. Africans across the continent and diaspora can be immensely proud of this unique innovation that Unisa has added to human civilization, but also a contribution of Africa. So today we are celebrating the grandmother of higher education in South Africa, the University of South Africa, but also a partner to the Ethiopian society, which has been and journeyed with yourselves in the reimagination and resourcing of human resources capital that is spread across in the varied sectors within the Ethiopian society. Today we've gathered here in partnership with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation as part of a commitment to science diplomacy in Africa, but also in the global arena. To this, we are grateful to Minister Pando for her foresight and leadership, for this partnership also could not have manifested without the investment therein of South African government and your own government. More importantly, this evening is to celebrate the cooperation of the governments and the peoples of South Africa and Ethiopia in the science, education, culture, innovation, and for this we are grateful. as a truly Pan-African university shaping futures in the service of humanity. Unisa considers the establishment of Ethiopia Regional Center as one of the significant milestones that we are celebrating in the 150-year evolution of the university. Unisa is also proud of the work and growth of Ethiopia Regional Center as a hub and its developmental impact in Ethiopia and in East Africa. Launched 16 years ago, Ethiopia Center was established through the bilateral agreement between the two governments as stated earlier on. It wasn't just for Africa to accessing higher education. The vision was not just to build a united, developmental, and prosperous Africa. The vision was also for us to looking at how we come together to imagining and investing in the future of Africa as an important partner but leader in the world. And this is something that we're greatly proud of and are appreciative. When our leaders, the presidents of Africa, engaged in the global arena around the contribution of Africa in peace building, in security, these are outcomes of the knowledge arenas that are humanizing, that are creating relationships that are undergirded by peace, which are relevant to the current context. As the university, we are also looking into improving digitization systems and expanding higher education, including the uptake of local and international distinguished scholars and students who are showing interest in this university. We've also looked into the 10 catalytic niche areas that are quite important in looking at the developmental questions, but also the solution systems that we as Africans, through knowledge, research, innovation, and engagement and partnership that has been established, can do together. These are marine studies, aviation and aeronautical studies, automotive industrial systems, energy, space study, and square kilometer array, which the South African government has invested highly on. We are also looking into strengthening conversion technologies, what is often referred to in popular discourse as the fourth industrial revolution. Natural sciences become quite pivotal in this context, as it is the strengthening of humanities, sciences, health studies, medicine, feminist and womanist and Busadi theorization, including strengthening of core curricular activities. As Unisa, we're deliberate when we say we want to engender Africa's intellectual futures. We do so knowing that to reclaim Africa's intellectual futures is about remembering Africa, her knowledge systems of the past, the present, and the future, her technologies that sometimes have not been pivoted or projected. We know too well that Africa's ontologies, cosmologies, and epistemologies have been obscured, discredited, othered because of the predominantly, sometimes Eurocentric ontological and epistemological orientations. And therefore, our strategy is to prioritize Africa in the world as Africa within itself. Finally, colleagues, we recognize, as our colleague Amina Mama reminds us, that it is in the cooperation and the regional experiences that locates us within the academy. Freedom family, just as an aspect of a much broader freedom struggles, for broader freedom of all Africa's people, women, men, and children, we reminded ourselves that education is not an elite indulgence, but a public good. We reminded ourselves that education is not an elite indulgence, but a public good, offering an important route to freedom and progress for Africa's oppressed, marginalized majorities. And we are appreciative that our own countries are looking to ensuring that inclusive and modern education is appreciated and becomes a pivot point. As a practical expression of these sentiments, colleagues, just 3 weeks ago at the Association of African Universities, a charter of transformative research collaboration hosted by Unisa, the University of Bristol in Windhoek, Namibia, created a charter around how we as Africa's institutions engage with the global arena as we do with ourselves. How do we cooperate? How do we invest in quality leadership? And how do we ensure that this university that has been the home of leaders, the home for Africa's knowledge system, the home for President Mandela, President Beki, President Ramaphosa, President Aristide, and many other illustrious scholars and leaders in our continent, we would like to ensure that the 150 years become even more meaningful in the next year, and wish you all the best and welcome you to this important celebration. You're welcome to the University of Leaders, the university that's a partner to the continent, projecting Africa's civilizations, knowledges, and technologies. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please one round of applause for Professor Kabula. Thank you very much for that. Now, the University of South Africa, which is a Pan-African university, in effect, and with a vision of the African university shaping futures in the service of humanity, is a university that is owned by the government of South Africa, and it has started operating here in Ethiopia since 2007. Since Unisa started operating in Ethiopia, the home in Ethiopia is the Ministry of Education, because we are talking about education, and the government has given us to the Ministry of Education, which is really, I cannot have words to appreciate the contributions and the partnership the Ministry of Education always shows us. And I really want to recognize the fact that our colleagues in the ministry are always very welcoming, very supportive, and we are having a very good relationship with them. We really thank them for that. And with this, I want to call upon the Honorable Minister of Education, Professor Nega. But before I want him to come to the podium, I just want to remark one very important point that he and his ministry are doing currently. It's a breakthrough and a very strong and important relationship in producing quality education in Ethiopia. He is working so hard in changing the education platform to become really fit for the education and for university, for higher education system, and also starting from the basement. So I really want to acknowledge him and recognize him so much for doing this big important breakthrough through the Ethiopian education quality system. With this, I really want to welcome and call upon Professor Nega, the Honorable Minister of Education of Ethiopia. Thank you.
Good evening, Excellency Madam Minister. I cannot say anything beyond that in terms of excellencies. My protocol thing is not very good. So excellencies, all of you, how are you? Welcome, welcome to this very important, in my view, celebration of 150 years of a place where people can get together and sit and think, seek knowledge, seek truth. It really is always incredible for me to think that a country has built that for such a long time. And It is a momentous occasion for a country to have such a higher learning institution for close to 150 years, and I really honestly want to congratulate the University of South Africa for reaching this very, very important milestone. I don't have a prepared statement. We are in the middle of giving exams and having our own headaches all over the country, therefore I don't have time to sit down and jot down any prepared statement. But I think what is important in this continent, in my view, is not just to expand education. It is to make sure we expand quality education. And one of the things that we have not been doing very well is in the hope to increase, to broaden access to education, we have played footsie with the quality of education, and that actually is hurting us more than anything else. And we in Ethiopia have seen this, and we have taken as our primary responsibility to actually ensure that we provide a diploma or a degree that means something, that indicates some meaningful education that can contribute to a country's development, not just distribute as alms these diplomas. And that, I think, we have discovered is what we have been doing quite a bit. One of the problems with education quality is not only what you teach, it's also the integrity of the education system that is important. Distance education, which Unisa is known for, is important insofar as there is an explicit understanding that both the students and the teachers and the institutions involved do not compromise on the integrity of the material that they are providing and the degree that they are providing. Now we have started to be a bit worried about distance education in this country precisely because of the integrity question more than anything else. And we are going to be, one of the things that we have started is we have started to look into the whole distance education program in this country to see whether actually the degrees or the diplomas that they are providing are really meaningful and high quality. No doubt about the University of South Africa. What we are doing is, in general, as a country, as the Ministry of Education, we have started an audit. We are auditing our own system. We are auditing our system to see the degree to which it is providing the knowledge that our kids require for a very, very challenging future, not only for our country, but for our continent. The future of this world is not something that we can somehow manage. This is becoming a very dangerous world that requires conscious engagement with the future. That's why we need our kids to know what is going on around the world and to provide them with the material that it needs, this continent will not fall back to where it was 80, 90, 100 years ago. If we are going to stand on our two legs, the most important thing that we do is we provide our children the best education that we can, high quality education. That is what we are embarking upon. And of course, this kind of enterprise requires cooperation, requires active engagement, not only at the country level, but at the continental level. And therefore, we hope we will engage on a continuous basis with institutions such as Unisa and others around the continent in this endeavor, in our hope to provide the best education that we can give to our children. I will assure you that we are looking for good partners with integrity, partners that can enhance our capabilities. And we are hoping that Unisa, after 150 years, would be the institution that have that integrity and that will continue. And this is important not just for us, but also for the children of South Africa. And I thank you. Allah.
Thank you, Minister, Professor Nega. Before I ask our Vice Chancellor to do the introduction of our keynote, I'd love to call it a keynote. DIRCO says it's a public lecture by Minister. I would love to recognize a number of persons that are here. We are very pleased that today we do have Mr. Pillay Munisami, who is representing SADC. We are pleased that you are here. We are very pleased there are a minimum of 5 countries from the diplomatic community that are present today. For us as Unisa, and of course this was made possible through our collaboration with DIRCO, we see this as testament or as acknowledgement of the work that we do. I would love to recognize His Excellency Mr. Kos, an ambassador from the embassy. I would love to recognize Ambassador Kamara, representative from the Embassy of the Republic of Mali. I would love to recognize His Excellency Dr. I think it's Her Excellency, Dr. Kasa. I think it is Yesi Kasa, because I met her. It was such a lovely occasion to speak to her, and she related to me how she was the first female Vice Chancellor of a university in Ethiopia. May we give her a round of applause. She was recognized by the government of Ethiopia for this achievement. And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, today, 31 July, is also the 61st anniversary of the Pan-African Women's Organization. I believe we do not recognize or celebrate power enough. But we need to recognize that even before the OAU was formed in Addis Ababa in May of 1963, the women of Africa had already met a year before to establish the Pan-African Women's Organization. Coming from Unisa, celebrating the 150th anniversary, another very important anniversary that I think we need to recognize, because Bosadi theorization and feminist theorizations is one of our niche areas at Unisa. This year is also the 150th anniversary of the birth of Mama Nokutela Ndima Dube. It is significant. The reason I mention her is this: Africa owes its national anthem to Mama Nokutela Ndima Dube. She, being the first wife of Reverend Dr. John Dube, she was a celebrated singer, a pianist. She was well-versed in international relations. She traveled the world fundraising alongside Dr. Dube for their interest in education, to establish what still exists today, the Ohlange High School in Durban. She was a member of faculty. She developed the curriculum for Ohlange Institute. A number of our notable politicians, including our very first deputy director in South Africa, the first deputy president in South Africa, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, studied at Ohlange Institute. Established by Mama Nokutela Ndima Dube. This year being the 150th anniversary of her birth, I think it just goes so well as we celebrate at Unisa to celebrate her as well. And the Vice Chancellor promised me that Unisa will certainly do a lot of work in recognizing a number of our unsung heroines in the African liberation movement. Mama Nokutela Dube trained a choir that sang Nkosi Sikelele Africa at the launch of this then called South African National Native Congress, which is now called the ANC, the oldest liberation movement in Africa. When it was launched on 8 January 1912, Mama Nokutela Dube organized a choir that sang Nkosi Sikelele Africa. The ANC adopted that anthem. Subsequent to that, a number of liberation movements in Africa also adopted that anthem. A number of African countries, if you listen to their independence, their national anthems, you can hear Nkosi Sikelele Africa sung as well. It is for that reason that I think it is important that we recognize her as well. We are pleased that Ambassador of Kenya is here. From South Africa, we have a number of departments, Minister Naledi Pando, that have come here as well to celebrate with us at Unisa. Of course, we have a delegation from DIRCO. We have a delegation from the Department of Transport, the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, the Department of Science and Innovation, the Department of Trade Industry and Competition, the Department of Higher Education and Training, the Department and Ministry of Tourism, the Department of Health, Justice and Constitutional Development, Government Printing Works, Correctional Services are present today, and a delegation as well from the business community, both in Addis Ababa, both in Ethiopia and from South Africa are here as well. Before we arrived to make preparations, Unisa also had an advanced team that had been on site since last week. Professor Lalendle had a team here in Addis Ababa doing the work, the groundwork, the preparation together with DIRCO, but importantly also ensuring that we continue to have students in Addis Ababa. I would love therefore now to pause there. I don't see Vice Chancellor Kabula. Thank you, BC. She will now do the honors of introducing our keynote, the public lecture, Dr. Naledi Pando.
Thank you, Dr. Tong. Let me, in addition, remember Ambassador Mukhtar Kedi. We cannot negotiate our visas if we don't recognize Ethiopian ambassador to South Africa. Ambassador Kedi, you're welcome. Let me also recognize Ambassador Fisea Shawol, Director General of African Affairs in the Department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Colleagues, can you just give them a round of applause? I'm truly honored, colleagues, to introduce to you the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa, Dr. Naledi Pando. What is even more exciting is because Dr. Naledi Pando is the South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. She became a Member of Parliament in 1994 at the dawn of our liberation and has amassed impressive experience in positions of public office, including as the Deputy Chief Whip for the African National Congress, the oldest liberation movement, and continuing in leading in the National Assembly from 1995 to 1998. She was also the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces in 1998 and its chairperson in 1999 to 2004. Her experience in the education policy planning and leading the higher education systems, science systems sector, and including the TVET colleges. She became the Minister of Education in 2004. She has been a member of cabinet ever since, serving as a Minister of Education in 2004 to 2009, Minister of Home Affairs in 2012 to 2014, Minister of Science and Technology in 2009 and 2012. I must state that under Minister Pando, some of the best innovations Africa has delivered, including the EVA car. That is often not talked about, Minister Pando. I would like the bragging rights to say, Jewel, the EV car that was produced in South Africa, it was under your leadership, and people must understand the interface with science and development, as Minister Nega has already averred. Minister of Science and Technology 2014 to 2018, and Minister of Higher Education and Training 2018 to 2019, Minister Pando has a PhD from the University of Pretoria, our neighbor, so we can claim that as well, an honorary doctorate from Cape Peninsula University of Technology, University of Stellenbosch, the University of Lisbon, Portugal, and the University College, Dublin, Ireland. On awarding her Germany highest federal award, the Grand Cross of Merit, the German ambassador to South Africa, Walter Lindner, said, "Pando is for us a symbol of the new South Africa, modern, innovative, dedicated to scientific progress, and also an outstanding woman leader." Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to requesting our Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of the Republic of South Africa to give her a keynote. Let's welcome her.
Right. Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor, for that very kind introduction. And good evening, Program Director, Program Directors. Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be here in Addis Ababa, the home of we Africans, although of course we have a debate, because we believe the cradle of humankind is South Africa. Ethiopians believe the cradle of humankind is Ethiopia. So we share the kudos, and scientists will eventually determine the outcome. Allow me to begin by recognizing the State Minister of the Ministry of Education, but more particularly the Minister of Education. Your Excellency, we're really thrilled that you could join us this evening. And of course, all the ambassadors who are our permanent representatives to the African Union and representing their countries in Ethiopia. Excellencies, warm greetings to you all. It's a great pleasure to be with you this evening and not to be fighting with you in the African Union in Nelson Mandela Hall. Not dealing with ambassadors today, but normally I do. Allow me as well to recognize our own Ambassador Mukhtar Abdu, the Ambassador of Ethiopia to South Africa, and of course the Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa. This is an extremely important office to occupy because the University of South Africa is not just any university. It's a significant institution in global terms. I would also like to recognize all the colleagues of Professor Kabula, the Deputy Vice Chancellors who are accompanying her, and the various senior officials, and of course all other senior officials from our departments in South Africa, and then Dr. Abera, the Regional Director of the Unisa Ethiopia Regional Learning Center, and all distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen present here this evening. I feel really honored and privileged to have the opportunity to address you at this amazing event, an event which marks a very important milestone in the life of the University of South Africa. The program director forgot in her list of exalted persons to mention that 100 years ago, a young African man became the first African to graduate from Unisa, and he was my grandfather, Z.K. Matthews. So, I'm especially pleased that Unisa, in planning for this evening, has chosen the very significant theme of science diplomacy, reclaiming Africa's intellectual future into the next 150 years. There can be no more important theme than that particular one, because we are challenged as the continent to ensure that we develop and hone our intellectual resources in a manner that will contribute to significantly advancing the development of our continent. We have an abundant presence of human resources, a very, very well-populated continent. But as His Excellency the Minister has said, we've not put the opportunity of human development to the best use possible. And we are challenged to do that. And so the theme of reclaiming our intellectual future is an extremely significantly important one. We have been told that in 1946, Unisa became the first university in the world to adopt an open distance education model. At that time, I remember they say it was called learning by correspondence through the Unisa Division of External Studies. The foresight and agility are what have seen Unisa adapting its practices through different iterations over the years. And now we celebrate it, still standing, still strong, 150 years later. Of course, you will all remember that institutions of higher learning as well as education institutions were confronted from 2019 on our continent with a very significant challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And many of us in government spent nights thinking about how we would respond, and particularly how the education sector would respond to the challenge of COVID-19, given that contact was a very serious threat of raising infections. I'm sure Unisa didn't debate this issue of how to continue to offer quality education, because they had confronted the subject of virtual education over many, many decades. And so they were one of the universities that were able to respond speedily and smartly to the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the fact that they had really begun to mature the offerings of distance learning, they were able to easily refit their digital offerings to ensure that their education programs could continue. And I think it's important that whenever we think of Unisa, we think of congratulating it for being innovative and foresighted, because this is absolutely imperative. I believe that celebrating an institution that is 150 years old is an important celebration, not just for South Africa, but for the entire African continent. And with respect to Unisa, it's a celebration for the globe. The reason I say that is that an institution such as this one offered something very different to those who wished to study. If I was a woman who was working as a nurse in a hospital and I wanted to acquire a BSc in public health, I could continue with my nursing profession while I studied for that degree through a distance institution such as Unisa. And I could be assured that that program that I'm following is a quality program and that I will become a senior professional in the nursing sector of health professions. So I think it's really important that we, as Africa, recognize Unisa as being a life-changing institution for many people, particularly in our context and on the continent for the working class, who don't often enjoy the opportunity for the elite contact universities that are extremely expensive for many of our working class communities to afford. With Unisa, you could follow 1 or 2 modules or 3 or 4, depending on your financial ability, depending on where you were in terms of your studies. So I think as a contributor to human resource development, it has played an extremely important role. I've often been concerned at the fact that on the African continent, we don't have significant numbers of PhDs, and in particular, significant numbers of full-time researchers. Minister, when I was Minister of Science and Technology, everybody used to call me Dr. Pando, because they thought no person can be Minister of Science if they don't have a doctorate. At the time, I had 2 Masters of Arts, so I thought maybe I'm close, to a doctorate. But being a very honest person, I eventually became embarrassed and uncomfortable at continuing to say, no, I'm not Dr. Pando, and saying it at a podium. And I thought, okay, I better make this real. And so at quite a senior age, I decided to pursue my PhD, and I actually successfully completed it. So today when they say Mrs. Pando, I say Dr. Pando. And why I refer to this is because what Unisa has done in Ethiopia has been extremely important. Unisa has produced over 800 master's degree graduates and a large number of PhDs. This is an extremely important achievement. But what I hope we will do with those graduates in the theme of reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures, I hope that we will use these graduates to be full-time researchers in our various ministries, our departments, and our public institutions, so that through their research and the skills they've acquired, they would inform the kind of changes we wish to see. It's very odd, Minister, that we will take someone who has no understanding of curriculum development to develop a new curriculum in a changing education system. We should be using curriculum experts. We don't use statisticians to gather data that informs us about what we should do with our education system. In these over 400 PhDs, in these over 800 masters, lies some of your young experts who will help you to transform education in Ethiopia to quality education. So use these graduates to good effect, because that is what is meant by reclaiming your intellectual capital. We have produced many graduates, but our young people feel their intellectual capacity is not being utilized on our continent. And we have to give them an answer by providing them with the opportunity to play a role in the transformation of our society. So, for example, if we wish to introduce digital learning, you can't take a 50-year-old to do that. Sorry to the 50-year-olds. But if you have a 25-year-old who's very good at coding, who's extremely interested in software development, it is that young person who will contribute to the kind of radical change that we need in education. So I think let us use the intellectual capability we have created to make the difference in our societies. I think one of the matters that we need to address relates to what the Minister of Education touched upon. And that is, we need, as African countries, to ask ourselves sometimes very hard but basic questions. Questions such as, what do we want South Africa to be like in 2063? What will Unisa be like in 2063? Or what will Unisa be like in 2173, 150 years from now? And to ensure that that vision that we have is achieved, what do we need to do between now and the lifetime we still have? So I think it's vital that we begin to become better at looking into the future and really starting to shape an African continent, a set of African countries that have within them the ability to really help us to create a very different world. What kind of contribution do we want the university, which will be based here, the campus here, to make to Ethiopia in terms of training future scholars, future professionals, and in generating new knowledge? One of the challenges that we have on the African continent, every development plan you read of each of our countries, and we've all written them, has the objective of eradicating poverty. But if we were to sit down and as academics and analysts look in detail at the plans that we have, I think it would be quite difficult to say in 10 years' time we would have reduced it by 10%, because the how is missing from our plans. And so it's vital that, again, we utilize our intellectual resources, our universities, to help us to shape the future and to develop concrete plans that actually work. I am really of a mind that our universities need to be generators of new knowledge, as the best universities in the world are. But what we must not do is believe we become the best by being like the West. We must become the best by being quality African. And I think this is the challenge that confronts us. We must respond to our African reality. We must develop innovations that address Africa's challenges. It's no use developing the most wonderful mathematics string theory when you cannot address the issues of development and poverty on the continent. So I think when we again talk of this recasting of our intellectual capabilities, we have to find a way of responding to our challenges. I have no difficulty with what they call blue skies research. You know, those are the people who are dreamers, who want to look in the black hole, you know, the color of pulsars. They want to do astronomy sciences, which I like very much, by the way. But what I would like to know from them is, if we have in one African country 200 informal settlements, which are shanty towns, how do we transform them to smart cities? That is what I believe our intellectuals should help us contribute to. For me, that will be blue skies research, because it will never have been done anywhere before. But we don't regard that as a research issue. We look at other things, and I believe we need to direct ourselves to those questions that respond to the deepest challenges our continent is confronted by. For example, in the health sector, thousands of Africans die every year of sleeping sickness, as it's called. Why are we unable to find the solution to this? Why have we been unable to address the issue of a vaccine for HIV as African scholars and intellectuals? Why haven't we, since the Second World War, found a new treatment for tuberculosis? We must answer these questions because these are problems deeply affecting us as Africa, and our inability to resolve them render us the prisoner of other systems rather than the determinant of our own future. So these are the challenges I place before you. Of course, all countries must have the ambition of advancing their scientific and technological development. We've seen that in the 21st century, all of us are really challenged, and we cannot answer some of these questions through international scientific diplomacy, an area that I really have a great interest in. And essentially, what international science diplomacy promotes is the development of real partnerships in which we work together through science and technology to respond to the range of knowledge challenges that we must confront as institutions and as the continent. Science diplomacy can be used very effectively as part of the efforts of a country to improve that intersection between science, technology, and international policy. The global community has acknowledged the work done by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I must boast here that I received an award from this association for promoting science diplomacy. They have done a great deal of work to ensure that they popularize the cause of science diplomacy. Now, what is often a challenge for us, we do have many of our scientists that participate in international science research groups, but a lot of them tend not to be principal researchers. The research is not focused on issues of intellectual challenge on the continent, and we are not bringing in other African intellectuals to be part of the research group. So we take up, some of us, many projects supported by the Horizon 2020 EU funding. But we don't really focus on research that has the subject as the continent. And I think for us, science diplomacy doesn't mean I'm partnering with a scientist in New Zealand. It means I establish that partnership to advance knowledge generation on the African continent. We have to have Africa as the center of what we do. That is not a limitation, it's an advancement. Our challenges are so many that if we focus on addressing them and successfully respond to them, we will be unique in the world because we will have become innovative. So I do think we must define science diplomacy as African science development. We have made a great deal of progress as Africa, and I must never undermine the progress we've made. We have begun to use science evidence in formulating both public as well as international policy. The University of South Africa has a presence in various countries throughout the continent. And I believe that what we should see the university do is encourage research partnerships between Cameroonians and Ethiopians, between Nigerians and Kenyans, so that we build international science diplomacy across the African continent among African researchers as well. This will mean building particular types of research funding offerings which encourage these kind of diverse African partnerships. This will be an excellent way of strengthening networks for research across our continent. Of course, partnerships help you to bring together a range of skills, a range of challenges to be addressed, and a range of resources that can be devoted to the research task. And I really would encourage greater diverse collaboration across the African continent. I'm one of the people who believe that if you do a PhD, some of your research must be international. Never do a PhD only in your location. Then you are very limited in the work that you've done. I do think that what we must encourage is part of your PhD must always be in another country, because then you become a truly knowledgeable researcher who is educated at a very, very senior level. So let us really look at the nature of research partnerships, at the form of graduate training that we do, and let us be innovative and change the aspect to ensure we develop international knowledge in our young people, and we don't have pedestrian national knowledge that doesn't really expand the intellectual opportunity. I believe science, technology, innovation are absolute enablers for achieving the socioeconomic development goals of Africa. They will help us if we use these disciplines. They will help us to build on our vast ecosystems of bilateral and multilateral relationships driven by shared values, common interests, and policy imperatives. I think we must develop such science and research networks and collaborations. We should look as researchers at how we give effect to the achievement of Agenda 2063, because it's us as Africans who must influence its successful implementation. Agenda 2063 has a range of priority areas. Someone should be gathering information on the progress we're making with the infrastructure component, the progress we're making with the digital component, the progress we're making with water access, the progress with agriculture, because all these sectors are part of Agenda 2063. And it is only universities that can play the role of that monitoring and evaluation and the support then to ensure that policy development responds to where we're not performing very well and massifies those aspects where we are successful. I also think we need to look at how the innovation ecosystem is developed within our continent. Do we have capable intellectual property practitioners? Do we have technology support officers in our universities? Is government providing enough funding for researchers to be able to commercialize the research that they do? So if you don't have an ecosystem that includes both public as well as private and of course higher education institutions, you will not achieve the success that is required. Successful science development countries will tell you that it was the ecosystem that made the difference. The ability to use it and its various components to good effect, to integrate for good innovation outcomes is what led to Finland being what it is today. So we need to mirror those developments and processes. It's no good for our governments not to fund the projects of researchers. How do we expect to have innovation? We're not magicians. Science requires science workers. And it's only if government provides that funding that we will do well. If government attracts the private sector to work with the public, that's when the difference will emerge. That's when we'll have innovative digital products. That's when we will do agro-processing at the highest value addition levels. That is the point at which we will know in concrete terms what we mean by beneficiation of our mineral resources. But without this integrated ecosystem of innovation, it's very difficult to perform. And so government is challenged to support our researchers. Government is challenged to make an intellectual study of what achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals means, to make a clear study of what addressing the impact of climate change means. And universities are the resource for us to do that. So then, this theme that the university has developed has committed the university to continuing adapting its knowledge production modalities, to adapt its research functions, its innovation focus, and its community engagement, very important, community engagement approaches, as well as commitment to addressing the evolving needs, as I said, of our African continent. All of us have an important role in ensuring sustainable economic growth for all our people on the African continent. Developed countries spend a great deal of money on research, development, and innovation as part of their recovery plans for current and future global economic crises. One of the interesting things about Africa, we copy the West on anything except science and innovation investment. It's very odd. And yet, it is science and innovation that has made developed countries as wealthy as they are. They've ensured, even in the context of the COVID-19 economic decline, that they don't reduce funding for research and innovation. We must be the same. Strong developing countries such as India and Brazil are reaping the benefits of investment in science, technology, and innovation-driven policies. Advances in technological knowledge have made possible significant reductions in poverty and improved the quality of life in China, in India, and in Brazil. We must learn from those lessons. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, governments have also placed focus and resources on expanded and strategic internationalism in the areas I've mentioned of joint research and innovation initiatives, on building human capacity through international mobility. And when I speak of mobility, I don't mean Africans going to Germany, I mean Germans coming to Africa. I don't mean Africans running to the United Kingdom, I mean the English coming to Africa. So mobility must mean a mobility where all of us are beneficiaries. This is absolutely important. And of course, we must ensure that we strengthen and grow the research infrastructure of our continent. I remember meeting a young man who had posed his MSc engineering study because the one engineering drawing technical instrument in the one laboratory in his university had broken down, and they had to wait for someone to come from overseas to fix it. So he had to stop his research for 6 months. Absolutely shocking. We must not allow that to happen. Our young people deserve excellent science laboratories. We must have technicians ready who can repair scientific instruments. Our young people should be able to do their research in the time in which they have at our institutions, and we must establish innovation hubs where they become full-time researchers supporting development and change on the African continent. It's absolutely imperative that we do this. We must, of course, support new areas of scientific development, such as the one referred to by the Vice-Chancellor, that is developing the largest radio astronomy infrastructure on the African continent, the Square Kilometre Array. as well as the Artemis program. We must support African countries and young students that are part of these important research infrastructure initiatives and allow them to play a role in the world's leading radio telescopes and deep space monitoring capacities. I believe it is probable that the square kilometer array, which is being built in South Africa and 7 other African countries throughout the continent, I believe one of the first Nobel Science Prizes will be awarded because of the SKA. It's a premier research infrastructure program that Africa is involved in. The Artemis program is a human and robotic moon exploration program that is led by NASA, involving the European Union, Japan, and the Canadian space programs. Its long-term goal is to establish a permanent human base on the moon and potentially thereafter on Mars. These are all exciting initiatives that we need to be a leading part of. What we've also seen is science has helped us to have a better understanding of complex global crises, such as climate change, the erosion of biological diversity, as well as pollution throughout the world. As we understand these crises, we begin to develop the first steps toward addressing them. I'm really pleased that with the outcomes that were secured at the recent COP27 summit on the shared threat to our environment, science played a key role in the final decisions. At a bilateral level, I'm really happy at the successful cooperation in the field of science between South Africa and Ethiopia. And I'm pleased that that cooperation includes endeavors in space science and technology. The project is implemented by the South African National Space Agency and the Ethiopian Space Science and Geospatial Institute. We must harness this cooperation and make it work to the good scientific success of Africa. Of course, what must happen, is that we should also see deeper dialogue between policymakers and innovators, particularly scientists. As politicians, we are very afraid of scientists. You see, they're very frank people. And because they're analytical, they don't come to you and tell you what is nice. They tell you, Minister, your agricultural policies are ruining the potential of food security in the future. Please look at them. And if you've developed that policy as the minister, you get very angry. But we need to learn to use this interface to the good of our countries. What it will help us do is to really end this gap that exists between innovation and creativity, because we want to guard territory so closely. We have to ensure that our universities, our science councils, our think tanks, our state-owned companies, industry, and innovation and technology hubs make use of initiatives such as the Continental Free Trade Area, as well as the Digital Transformation Strategy of Africa. We've got to use all of the instruments we have to create the Africa we want. Of course, we have all these wonderful African proverbs. I even heard President Putin quoting this one. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This applies to the progress that we need in the field of science. The solutions that science creates and needs are borderless, and they require collective effort. They are also multidisciplinary. So if you think the solution in agriculture can only be determined by agricultural scientists, you are mistaken. You need the social scientists to engage the community and persuade them to appropriate new approaches and new solutions. So multidisciplinarity is extremely important to what we need to do. We in the African Union have stated our ambition to reinforce science, technology and innovation capabilities in Africa. We have agreed that science will help to reboot weakened multilateral institutions, which are absolutely crucial to achieving our development aspirations. We must utilize our membership of multilateral and minilateral partnerships to bridge the digital divide and secure access to technology so that we create multiple jobs and opportunities for our young people and attract investment. So essentially, what I'm saying is that we, as political leaders on the continent, must create a conducive environment that allows science to flourish on our continent and in all countries of the South. As members of the developing South populations, we are often seen as beggars when we ask for access to key technologies for our development. Developed countries place hefty requirements, unfair and discriminatory trade regimes, which limit our advances in science. Again, we must cooperate as Africa in rejecting this unfair discrimination against us. We saw with the recent COVID pandemic that effective health solutions are science-based. Developed countries used their scientific research capabilities and were quick to respond. We were rather slow. On a positive note, as South Africa, we've also become part of launching, through the World Health Organization, an mRNA hub, which will be led by Afrigen, supported by a number of pharmaceutical companies, including the NAT South Africa Laboratory. The hub will collaborate with the mRNA hub by providing RNA enzymes that are required to produce vaccines. This will take place not just in South Africa, but in 8 other African countries which have become the spokes of the regional hub that is South Africa. This is going to be a tremendous contribution to ensuring that Africa is not left behind when the world is faced once more with a debilitating pandemic such as the COVID-19 experience. Achieving the status of a hub and this technology transfer did not come easy. You will remember how we had to fight at the WTO to get access to intellectual property, and we just wanted it for a temporary period, not forever, but we had to wage a real battle to get that access. So now that we've won a limited relaxation of intellectual property rights by the WTO, we must make good on this space and ensure that the continent develops vaccines for a range of diseases that are prevalent on the continent, and that never again will Africa be last in the queue for solutions for a pandemic. We, of course, also need fundamental transformation and modernization of the global financial architecture and reform of multilateral development banks to make them fit for purpose to assist developing countries with sustainable development and just transition efforts. By addressing issues such as debt, risk aversion to investing in developing countries, and creating markets in developing regions for new technologies such as green hydrogen, these development financing institutions will be playing a positive role on the continent. And if they invest in our science capabilities, the full power of science, technology, and innovation will be unleashed in Africa. So I conclude by saying the possibilities of science are limitless. And as we proceed with groundbreaking research and innovation, it is going to be inevitable that multilateralism will become more and more important and will be strengthened as countries break through frontiers with far greater speed and effectiveness through working together. My hope is that in rebooting multilateralism, in recasting it, science will also help to fortify the bonds of global solidarity on many of the pressing issues of our time. It is time that the issues of Africa become the preeminent issues of the globe. But it is only if we, as Africans, make that our agenda that we will achieve this objective. I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Minister Dr. Pando, it's very difficult to speak after such a speech which is full of wisdom, and I don't know what to say next to this. But I really want to thank her so much because she made this thing really a reality, because she is the one who, I should say, initiated everything in this session, and also she made it happen. So I really want to send my sincere gratitude from Unisa Ethiopia Regional Learning Center and to thank Honorable Minister Dr. Pando to make such a very beautiful speech, not only in terms of beauty, but also deep in the hearts of Africans. And thank you very much for doing this. With this, I'm sorry we have to rush the program a bit, but I just want to acknowledge a few people before we continue. I really want to acknowledge Dr. Samuel Kifle and his team for really assisting the Ethiopia Regional Learning Center so closely. I also want to acknowledge Honorable Ambassador Dr. Ishim Mabrat, who is the Member of Parliament. I also want to recognize colleagues from Addis Ababa University, Dr. Mabet Mulgeta and also Dr. Marcestin Sarmo present here. I want to recognize colleagues from Addis Ababa Science and Technology University, Dr. Abraham and Dr. Binyam. With these two universities, we have partnership agreements and we are working so closely together, so I really want to recognize them. But I want to have special recognition to Ambassador Makaya, who is our home here in Ethiopia. So Ambassador Makaya is Ambassador of South Africa in Ethiopia. And I want to also have to recognize all ambassadors present in this session and our EDs from the different colleges like Prof. Nkosi and Prof. Mitlulua, and also our alumni and distinguished students. Thank you very much for making time for us. Now it's going to be the session for the panel. I have two panelists here, and they are going to respond to what Honorable Dr. Pando has been speaking on the topic of science diplomacy and innovation, and that science diplomacy and innovation, most importantly, in reclaiming Africa's intellectual futures in the next 150 years. So with this, I'm calling Professor Afwork Kasu Gizau to the podium, who is now the current Director General of AHRI, and also I want to call upon Ms. Saimanot Tesfaye. Let me just limit it for now to be our alumni chapter. Thank you very much. So please come to the podium, and you are going to be our panelists. We are going to rush the program, I'm sorry, because there are many issues that must be done. Please, both of you, please come to the podium. Yeah. Ms. Saimanot, I'm also calling both of you to please come to the podium. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let me just say a bit of information about both panelists. So up until Haimanut comes over, let me just introduce our panelist, Professor Afwork Kasu Gizau. He is a biomedical scientist by profession, and he earned his PhD from the University of Tokyo Fukushima from Japan in 2007. And he did his postdoc at the University of Colorado, Denver in the United States from 2008 to 2010. He was a very senior academic in the medical colleges of both Gondar University and Addis Ababa University. And he worked starting from the level of graduate assistant to the level of professorship, full professorship. I think he was a professor maybe because he was even certified. So he really made it so fast, and he published more than 140 articles in accredited journals. From 2015 to date, he assumed different positions in the government, and so notably, I just want to mention the ministries that he has been working as state minister. Honorable Dr. Pando, he has been state minister of Ministry of Science and Technology. He has been state minister of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He has been state minister of Ministry of Science and Higher Education. So he's too close to your heart in many of his experiences. As a very experienced researcher, as he's now the Director General of the Armor Hansen Research Institute. Professor Apork has served and is serving in many boards of councils and professional associations. He received different awards like Young Rising Star Award, Best Scientific Paper of the Year Award, and last year in 2022 he was awarded of decoration of the Order of the Rising Sun, Gold and Silver Star from Japan. So for this, I'm going to give you his phone number so that you are going to see his profile picture in the WhatsApp where he is showing one of his awards. So he's going to be our panelist today. The second panelist who we really admire for her being a very vibrant chapter convener for our center is Ms. Haymanot Tesfaye. She is an alumnus of Unisa. She graduated in Master of Business Leadership from our very distinguished school, which we call School of Business Leadership. And she's a chapter convener and alumni of Ethiopia since she's a chapter convener of our alumnus chapter here in Ethiopia since 2018. She made really a difference in the chapter. There was someone who was chosen to be the chapter convener before her, but no movement was there. She came in and she made it so vibrant, and we really thank her for that. We always talk about our alumni to be our ambassadors, and we highly recognize them. And she's working as a Vice Chancellor of the Executive Committee of African Chapter Conveners, and she has over 15 years of work experience in managerial support positions in different sectors that range from government, non-government, international, and humanitarian organizations. Just to mention a few, she has been staff member of Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, Swiss Red Cross, ILO, and currently she's serving as finance and admin in the UN FAO. Her skills and passion include business development, resource mobilization, finance and project management, and volunteering in professional development. So with this small introduction, I'm going to ask our panelists to speak. I'm really very sorry. I'm going to give each one of you only 10 minutes, and we cannot pass from those 10 minutes. I'm really sorry, even if I know that you are really experienced and people with many wisdom and tell us a lot, but I'm really sorry to limit it to that. And so maybe let's start from the lady. So, Ms. Haymanot, will you please reflect upon what our Honorable Dr. Pando has been saying, and also on the issue of reclaiming Africa's future. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you to Dr. Zoge for the introduction, for the brief introduction, and it's really a pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed the lecture, which is very timely and important. It's really important that we as my members and the community should be able to provide and support the university in its endeavor to develop research and developments, and its endeavor to expand its footprint throughout the continent, Africa. And it's true that I came to know Dr. Pandori, Minister, during a magazine, her content shared during the Unisa 145 anniversary. It really captured my interest. And Unisa, I'm really grateful for Unisa, the way it presents education and access, the modalities of its modalities of delivering education is really very unique and is very transformational. I, on behalf of the Unisa Ethiopia, would like to really appreciate the University of South Africa's commitment in Ethiopia and the very good collaboration, which we think can be shared to the rest of the continent. We are very grateful that we are able to manage and access education, which is a quality one and uncompromised. I heard Dr. Brhanu saying that in Ethiopia we have relatively a better access to education, but what is challenging us is the level of the quality of the education. So it's really something that we need to benchmark and be able to create an education system that's very reliable and uncompromised. And regarding research and science, I believe it's a time where we give a high priority, and I could really understand the urgency and the need of developing science, research, and development, because we are going to and living an area for the Industrial Revolution. So I believe it will be very important, like a network of professional associations like us. It's very important to keep the alumni members engaged in a continuous form so that we keep the learning process ongoing. And the only way to do that is like to give them an access. Once we give an access of a quality education to the students, should be an end to it. We make them a continuous learner and see that they contribute meaningfully to the problems and to the challenge of the existing problems in Africa. What's very relevant and unique about Unisa is it presents the challenges and create an opportunity for developing academicians who are really there to make a difference. And it's about the modalities, and it's about creating a platform where they continue to engage. So supporting the initiatives of alumni chapters would be very relevant, so that we keep on supporting the overall agenda of the university, as well as the agenda of the Africa, transforming Africa. Thank you.
Thank you for making it even before the time. So do you want to have 15 minutes by taking her 5 more minutes? Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor Afwerk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zegge and Unisa, for the opportunity. Excellencies, Minister from South Africa, Dr. Pando, our Minister, Professor Brhanu, our State Minister, Dr. Samuel, Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the diplomatic community, academicians, members of the extended family of Unisa who are present here. For me, as generously presented by Dr. Zegge, as a senior African professional with experiences in diplomacy, science, education, technology, innovation, etc., getting such a podium and trying to address the contribution of Unisa on this very special day is a unique opportunity. So I would like to thank Unisa for giving me this opportunity. And then I would like to thank the organizers for bringing us together. For us in Addis Ababa, having this kind of gathering is not very common. Leaders from different walks of life, leadership areas have gathered here to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Unisa, to celebrate the achievements of the past, and to pinpoint and discuss on very important areas for the coming 150 years. Thank you very much for that. Her Excellency, you touched almost everything, not only Unisa, but also the higher education system in our continent and beyond shall focus in the years to come. The current innovation ecosystem in Ethiopia, in South Africa, and other parts of Africa is challenged. Excellency, you rightly cited all the important areas we need to focus in making sure that the innovation ecosystem works. That is an area where I wanted to contribute as discussant. One, we have a lot in Africa, but we are not making use of what we have in Africa. For that, we need an innovation ecosystem that also embraces our indigenous knowledge. Unless we tap on the very rich knowledge we have in our communities, we cannot address the various challenges that are facing Africa. Excellency, you mentioned about the vaccine challenge. We in Africa, we are importing 99% of our vaccine needs from other parts of the world. Only 1% of our need is covered in Africa. So that requires the required human resource development. That is the challenge we give today to Unisa and other African universities to come up with the right intellectuals to fill the big gaps in human resource development. Infrastructure is another challenge. When COVID hit the world and Africa, we were very much challenged even to test our first few samples. We had universities doing the polymerase chain reaction and other PCR technologies required to test that kind of challenge, but we are not ready. So the infrastructure, the facilities, the technologies, they have to be there. We have to also, as again excellently presented by Her Excellency, we have to invest for research and innovation in Africa. Investment for research and innovation is not a little investment. If we invest today, we will reap the products tomorrow. COVID is a very good example. Now, learning from COVID, many African universities are trying to embark on vaccine R&D initiatives. Some African private sector institutions are trying to come up with vaccine manufacturing infrastructure. So investment by government and collaboration with the private sector is critically important. For our universities, as hubs for knowledge, providing our universities with the right amount of funding for research and development is the key. When you connect all these little points together, what Excellency has said can be seen on the ground as a very good fruit. My professor also mentioned the importance of integrity in education system. We are over 1.something billion in Africa. The large number of African population looking into 150 years ahead of us, looking into 30 years ahead of us, even looking into the SDG target time, the 2030, we have to invest a lot on education integrity, addressing the issues of quality, also addressing the issues of relevance, access, and equity. That requires investment. That investment requires, again, as mentioned by our minister, the importance of tapping the right knowledge from our intellectuals. Our intellectuals, they have to be given the panel, the forum, the floor to come together to debate on important development policy agendas of our continent. So Unisa over the years have contributed a lot, not only to South Africa, not only to Ethiopia, but also to Africa, I believe. As someone who stayed for years in the area of development, I'm a witness that graduates of Unisa are serving Ethiopia in our higher education institutions, in our different public sector, private sector institutions, in regional bodies, in continental bodies and global bodies. We have to thank Unisa for that contribution of the past years. And we have to capitalize, learning from our past goods and bads, what to do better in the years to come. So in that line, learning from our existing African institutions like the African Association of African Universities, learning from the African Academy of Sciences, learning from regional organizations like IGAD, SADC, and others. It's critically important to, again, in organizing the strategy of Unisa for the years to come. Again, connecting those dots, it's my hope and belief that Unisa would contribute much better in the years to come, serving Africa and beyond. Thank you very much.
I cannot thank the panelists enough because they just made it before the time, because we are short of time, and I'm really happy that they have made it. And thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse us. We cannot go into the QA because of in the interest of time. We must close the panel session in this one. I really want to thank both panelists, Professor Afork and Professor Ms. Saimanot. You can please go to your chairs. Thank you very much for that. So.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abera. Absolutely enjoying doing this with you. As Vice Principal Meiwa comes to the podium to do the next item, I would love to negotiate VP. Thanks. As you are walking up, earlier on, I did not mention by mistake to acknowledge the Ambassador of the Republic of Angola, the Ambassador of the Republic of Egypt, of Botswana, Mozambique, as well as from Eritrea. Unisa enjoys a really great master's program in Eritrea, and it's very important to acknowledge them. Thank you, Vice Principal Meiwa.
Thank you, Program Director. My principals have acknowledged everybody. I'm not going to acknowledge, but just to express gratitude on behalf of Unisa. We've been called upon to revolutionize. There's a call from the Minister, a call from our respondents, a call from the Vice Chancellor that Africa we want to see, we've got to see. That it must be an Africa that's fit for purpose. Now, with the short time that I have, I want to start off by acknowledging one of our African leaders, Kwame Nkrumah, whose words very much reverberates what we've heard this afternoon to the evening. He says revolutions are brought about by men and women who think as people of action and act as people of thought, a close quote. And indeed, with acting as people of thought, we have been, through what's been shared, given plans, given platforms, and given what we need to do. And at the heart of it, as a leader within the University of South Africa leading research, it has very much pointed to me that we need to have operational plans that have targets and that are very cognizant of the fact that we cannot work alone. We've got to be having interactions, to be having inclusive cooperations that are public-private partnerships, and in so doing, we'll be able to find solutions that are based and emanate from evidence and experiential research. And the research, of course, cannot just happen without the investments that needs to happen for us to be able to enjoy innovation, for us to actually catapult technology that is very much existing within Africa. And doing so, we shall indeed be supporting all the aspirations and all the calls that have been made thus far. And at the heart of it all, youth, the young academic, the young person, man and woman, has been put at the center of that. And through, as I end, policy making as well as researchers having the dialogues in all of what has been called upon to revolutionize, all that we need to see for the Africa that we want to see, Africa that is fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Professor Tenjue Meiwa was shy to let you know that, in fact, the campus here at Addis Ababa reports to her. So, in fact, she is our point person from a Unisa perspective who is liaising with the campus here, the government, etc. Honorable Dr. Naledi Pando, we didn't forewarn you, so please excuse us for this. You and the Vice-Chancellor, we are going to ask you to come and ceremoniously cut the cake of the 150. May I please request, and we really appreciate your speech earlier on was so much on fire. I didn't get time to thank you for that as well. So ladies and gentlemen, we move now directly to the next item on the agenda, which is the cutting of the Unisa cake. IT people, you know what you need to do? Please do your magic that we discussed. IT, are you going to do the thing you need to do? The music, please. Now, this is so awkward. We're waiting for the music so that, thanks. While we do all of that, I want to acknowledge Ambassador Tselane Mokoena and her team. Great work, absolutely have done great, great, great work in assisting us to put today's event together. I see Vice-Chancellor standing. Dr. Bera.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues, for everything. I really want to say thank you for the ceremonial session. Your Excellency, Dr. Pando, and my Vice Chancellor, Professor Kabula, can I just say that Africa is not a continent? For me, Africa is a country. It's just one country. And that's why we are also the cradle of humankind for the whole world. Everyone in this world, ever since Adam and Hawa, up until the last one, where the source are, it's Africa who is the source. So we are a country, we are not a continent. And we have to really work towards that in terms of making our country a country and relating only maybe by direction, south, north, south, east, west, and central. Just that. So I really look forward to the Africa of that type, not in next 150 years, but maybe in next 20, 30 years. Thank you very much for that. So with this, we are coming to finalizing our program in this venue, and I want to call upon His Excellency Ambassador Kolisa Makaya, head of the South Africa Embassy in Ethiopia. He is also responsible not only for Ethiopia, but regional countries like Djibouti. Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador. Please give us a vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
I know that I'm standing between all of you and the dinner. And because of that, out of respect to my boss, Honorable Minister Pando, I'm going to summarize the very good remarks that were prepared by the embassy. As I do that, I just wanted to acknowledge our host, the professor, Minister of Education in this country, and his deputy, the state minister. I also then recognize my own boss, Dr. Naledi Pando, the Minister of International Relations of the Republic of South Africa. Of course, I cannot fail to recognize the great professor, the principal and the vice chancellor of Unisa, and their team. My sister, Honorable Minister, in the past 2 years, she used to come to my office almost every third day, screaming. But now she's no longer coming to my office. So maybe something good is about to happen. Senior government officials here, the ambassador of Ethiopia to South Africa, my dear friends, the diplomatic corps that is here. Here we've got ambassador of Cameroon, of Mali, Malawi, Mauritius, SADR, Western Sahara, Ethiopia. We've got Angola, Ambassador Miguel, and then our sister Ambassador Jean from Kenya, our famous Binyami of Eritrea, and the representatives of various embassies that are here, Minister. Minister, I need to say up front that I received not less than 20 apologies from the ambassadors, African ambassadors accredited to Ethiopia. They would have loved to be part of this great celebration, but I think there was a bit of a short notice in terms of the notification, and many of them already taken a bit of a break. And of course, the first one to confirm her attendance is our neighbor, Ambassador Emilia of the Republic of Namibia. She's seated there. I just want this gathering to really give a round of applause to these representatives of the sister countries from the continent. It's not an easy thing to leave everything behind to attend a function. Colleagues, we are humbled by your presence. All protocol is observed, and I just wanted to say good evening to all of you. And as I stand before you to pass a vote of thanks, one is not unaware of the time constraints, and therefore, as I said, I'm going to summarize my remarks. A special gratitude goes to our guest of honor, Her Excellency Dr. Naledi Pando, not only for accepting Unisa's invitation to grace this occasion, but also and most importantly, for delivering such a profound lecture this evening under the theme Science, Diplomacy and Innovation in Reclaiming Africa's Intellectual Futures into the next 150 years. Shall we give her another round of applause, please? Quite profound delivery this evening. To my dear friends, the ambassadors here, I just want to also then highlight to them, for me, it's always a pleasure to brief her because she reads in advance, so I don't have to brief, we just discuss the issues. So, Minister, we are honored by your presence. We also thank Professor Nkambule and her predecessors and the entire Unisa community for their strategic commitment to education on the African continent. They are living one of Nelson Mandela's profound goals, which is education is the powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Unisa is living that code, and we want to thank you, Prof, and your team. Looking at the progress that we have achieved within the short period of time you have been here in Addis Ababa, we believe that by year 2030, by year 2063, the Minister Pando spoke about, you would have produced an army of intellectuals in this country. Intellectuals that will be busy producing knowledge for this great country, the headquarters of our union. Please keep up the good work, and you have got our support. I also want to thank Professor Nega and his ministry for the support that they have given to Unisa over the years. We remain hopeful, Professor, that the support that you have given will soon be manifested in finding a suitable site for Unisa, so that Unisa could then construct its regional hub here, and thus realizing its ambition. So we are hoping, Minister, and it has to be in the not so distant future, because the professor and her team are itching. Your sister here is itching. They want to put up this very grand site here to provide education to the continent. I also want to thank the colleagues who have worked with my team in the office to make this day a success. It has been a very involved process, but the colleagues have distinguished themselves. We've got this event this evening. I just want to thank you, colleagues, because without your effort, your commitment, maybe we would not be standing here tonight. Finally, colleagues, allow me to thank each one of you for making up this day and be with us this evening. And by so doing, you have contributed profoundly to the grand success of this event. An event that, as an embassy of the Republic of South Africa here, we're quite proud that Unisa found it necessary to come and celebrate its 150 years here at the AU headquarters in this great country called Ethiopia. Thank you very much, and colleagues. Now I need to exit the stage. You forgot, my sister, to signal to me. In fact, the minister also then signaled. Some of us are old. In my earlier life, I was hoping that I would be called doctor, but I think the age has caught up with me. Thank you very much, then, colleagues.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, with those words, thank you indeed, Ambassador. Absolutely, your team has worked very hard to help us make this possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite you to dinner on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Minister. Dinner is going to be served in the room next door. There is a traditional music prepared. Dr. Bera said, I should let you know that you should be prepared to dance tonight. They said, a coffee ceremony prepared in the next room, and yes, you shall be able to partake of the cake as well in the next room. Mema Shari, may I hand over to your team to manage our movement into the next room. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The formalities end. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.